that you're sharing this space with me. I deeply um, appreciate your presence, your intention to create deep awareness within yourself and also bring that to your clients, your loved ones in such a noble intention. And thank you for joining me month after month and continuing this conversation. And yeah, so as we share that, let's dive into our session today. It is our sixth lecture today, and we have come quite far. In fact, if you come to think of it, this lecture series includes 12 sessions. I was going through the slides, as you notice. Yeah, so 12 sessions, and today we are on the sixth. So we have come halfway. And one of the things that I have noticed from some of your feedback and requests you make, they talk more about coaching. How do we do this in coaching? I do understand your interest and also that eagerness. And so I think it's a moment to remind all of ourselves that this lecture series is really not about doing something. This is really gaining awareness around the CTICC coaching framework, along the line, gaining a deeper awareness of what does it really mean to be a trauma-informed coach, the depth that is required, the intention that is required, the knowledge that you gain, and sensitivity, how you work with human beings. So this is why we are here. And this program, these 12 sessions, although as you're starting to notice, it's quite comprehensive, does not necessarily provide you that right set of skills right set of skills for you to work with clients integrating trauma. We need to be very careful as we do that because it's a very sensitive area. Plus, that there is very thin line between how we operate as trauma-informed coaches work. Therefore, we need to be very mindful, careful about what we do. Of course, if you are interested in structurally learning and gaining the right qualification, of course, you know that we do have a ICF accredited level 2, level 3 program. You are most welcome to join them. In fact, the current cohort is full. I think in August, we still have a few seats. Right, let's dive into this session today. So this series is on how trauma informs love. And I have made it a point as I share these insights with you to make sure that I do not show up here with a poker face. Because something that you may have noticed in academic environments or professional development environments, when we talk about our clients, perhaps patients, the academia tend to have a poker face. It's almost like it's happening only to our clients or our patients. It's nothing to do with us. That kind of, I don't mean that that's how it's meant, but that's how it sometimes comes across. And that's the reason why sometimes I share with you my stories. And that's why I invite to resonate, reflect about your reality. I think something that is so very important when we work with our clients is that if we truly understand what we do, if we truly can relate to what is happening within ourselves as we engage with our clients, I believe that it enables much powerful transformation within our clients. It's so very important. And today I'm just coming out of a mentoring session with a group of professionals, and in fact, some of you are here. And in fact, one of my colleagues said something very powerful, which is that when we say that we coach the client, if not coach the person, we truly mean that we coach the autonomy of the person. And based on our discussion today, we were able to bring that to even a higher level of awareness. So if you're talking about a person, we are talking about autonomy. If you're talking about client autonomy, we are actually talking about client's nervous system. So when we say we are coaching the person, that means we are coaching client's nervous system as well. Have you ever thought about it? Today, in this session, we will dive deeper into relational imprints, how nervous system plays a role in that. And then in the next session, we will discuss how trauma is imprinted in our physical body. So you are starting to recognize when we work as a trauma-informed or trauma integration coach, we go way beyond even just coach the person, right? I think you hear this very common saying, coach the person, not the problem. So we are talking about now coach the person, coach client autonomy, and it means coach the client's nervous system. So we are really expanding our world. Like I said, it may not be possible immediately for you to work as a trauma-informed coach or trauma integration coach with your clients, but I strongly still believe that lots of the content, the context that we are sharing, could be valuable for you as a professional coach, although you do not necessarily directly engage in trauma or trauma imprints, trauma responses that might come up during the coaching session. So I still hope this program or this lecture series is valuable for you. So like I said, we will deep dive into how imprinting is encoded in us, not just only in the psychology, but also the emotion and the nervous system as well. As always, there may be some discussion around adversities, challenging experiences, trauma. So if you're a highly sensitive person, please engage with um, caution. And make a note, if you have any questions, feel free to send them via Zoom. If I didn't incorporate immediately into this session, I'll make sure that we will discuss in the future sessions based on the relevance. And my colleague and my sister Lux will be sharing the certification link later towards the end of the session. And please share your candid thoughts. And every time, in fact, when my team posts your reflections, it's just a moment of celebration for me, practically speaking, because most of the time these sessions tend to be one way, as they are lecture series. And this, if you're going to do this as a workshop, it's going to take lots of time, and it's going to bring a lot of your inner world. I'm not sure whether that's the right time, and we also do not have that much time. I would like to deliver as much as possible within a short period of time, considering that this is just only a lecture series for the moment. So as you share your insights, how you received, it really makes my day. And one of the reasons is that very often, as I share some of my own deep experiences, talk about my clients and sharing some new technical knowledge, I wonder how did my colleagues, my friends, those who show up receive this? And when I know that you have gained some value out of this and it was insightful for you, it just makes my day. And I think most importantly, most of your feedback is not just about how you go on to treat or work with your clients. They are more about how you receive this information. What does that mean to you? And that's extremely powerful. So thank you so very much for applying what you are co-creating with me here, first to your life. And I do believe when you incorporate it within your life, it definitely transcends into your loved ones, and then beyond the loved ones, your clients and the communities that you belong to, workplace that you belong to. And in fact, recently there was a professional coach joining me with a strategy conversation, being interested in joining the trauma-informed class. So I asked her, why is the interest? Well, so of course she had several reasons that she wants to elevate her practice. She always wanted to not just only work with one part of the client, but really encompass the entire client's story. So many intentions. And one of the interesting things that she said is that she has a colleague who has been through our trauma integration program, and she said, this is one of her colleagues that she meets on a regular basis daily. She said, this person was very different before she went through the program. And after, I feel that her demeanor has changed. The way she speaks has changed. The entire way that she's coaching has changed. And I noticed this change very clearly, and she inspired me so deeply. And that's why I'm interested in doing this program. So I noticed that even within these sessions, you are already creating that transformation within yourself. For that, thank you. I'm truly grateful, and I'm so appreciative of you for implying this knowledge into your real world experiences. And I do believe that it creates a very strong domino effect. Like I told you in one of the previous sessions, that I do not believe in the world leaders making a changing the world or bringing the world peace. I do not believe that one leader, two leader, or even a bunch of leaders actually really can do that. Politicians or billionaires, the spiritual gurus, sages. I don't think that's possible. I think it's only possible through that all of us become educated. Why are we behaving in this specific way? It's important that we all take those actions. Perhaps we might not see world peace within our lifetime, but I think we are creating a world that could become safer, if not world peace, if it is too far-fetched. So it has to begin within us. And that's why every month I very much look forward to these sessions. And thank you for joining me once again. And thank you for applying this co-creation into your life, into your loved ones' lives, and then to your clients if it's possible. Quick recap. Today, I'm going to very quickly share with you that as you're aware, this is CTICC framework. It's directly aligned with the ICF competency framework. And if you come to think about how in depth we can go, so far, the last 4 sessions have just focused on the 4.5 of this competency framework, a sub-competency, which is trauma-informed psychoeducation, offers information on trauma responses, triggers, aftermath, in this case, the imprints of trauma to help clients understand and normalize their experiences. So if you are wondering, what should I know? How should I be to become a professional trauma-informed practitioner, in this case, coach, you notice that there's an ocean of knowledge that is valuable for us to gain. So therefore, let's dive in and go into reflection. The first thing that I would like to invite you to think about is, what are some relational qualities, right? Relational qualities at this stage, let's say relational qualities, because we have not yet discussed relational imprints, which is the topic for today. But relational qualities of your clients, both perhaps what you would call constructive or non-constructive, that you notice. And most importantly, how do you actively address them? Let's take a moment. Relational qualities. Well, we cannot escape discussing relational qualities. If you come to think of it, coach the person, not the problem. A person is not possible. I think I'm accurate to say this. A person is not possible without their relationships, their associations. There is no person without their associations. You see what I mean? So client's autonomy is strong part of their relationships. Therefore, if you are a coach who focus on the person, client autonomy, you are a coach who focus on relational qualities. Therefore, I ask you, how do you actively address relational qualities? I don't think the clients come to our sessions and say, today I would like to address my relational qualities. That's not going to happen unless it's a rare occasion. Therefore, while you are accompanying client towards their growth, how do you do this? Most importantly, what you need. How much should you know about relational qualities? How in depth should you know? So today I'm hoping I'll be able to create some awareness, some understanding around relational qualities, especially looking at them from a deeper perspective. Not just only our relations here and now, but how did we create these relationships here and now based on the journey we have been through, our clients been through. So you're talking about trauma imprinting, right? So we need to remind ourselves the definition of trauma imprinting as a quick recap, right? So this is what we understand as enduring unconscious adaptations. The word unconscious is very important because when we say unconscious, it means we are not consciously aware. Now, perhaps at the beginning of these sessions, I have been telling you that our conscious selves are really very limited. But our unconscious selves are the ones who are dominantly actually whispering in our ear who we are, what we do, how we do, why we do very often. Therefore, you're noticing the deeper we learn about trauma imprints, the deeper we understanding how unconscious our behavior is, although we do not realize that consciously. So unconscious adaptations, beliefs, relational templates, identity structures, bodily patterns, which emerge from overwhelming, adverse, stressful, challenging, depriving adversities as a child, those things that we have experienced. They continue to influence our perception, our behavior, our relationships, and our life outcomes long after original event has passed. This is what we call trauma imprints. Most of the time, these trauma imprints are not even considered as diagnostic criteria. That's what we came to know during our last conversation. If you recall, we said that when a psychotherapist, trauma-informed psychotherapist or a trauma specialist work with a client, they work with the symptoms. Symptoms are those strong trauma responses. But that's also quite limited. Even the clinical operations are quite limited, which opens up a new door, quite a large spectrum of door for practitioners like us, professional coaches, psychotherapists, healers, to go beyond just the symptoms or trauma responses and see how part of client's autonomy has been formed, influenced by past experiences. I'm not saying in any way that that's a bad thing. In fact, the more we learn, the more we realize that the trauma imprinting is what makes us who we are. Then, as trauma imprinting is something that happens, that's something that we learn, something our nervous system learns, something that we are carrying in our neural networks. If it was possible to be implied on us, it's also possible for us to change as well. Therefore, we see the opportunity, we recognize the post-traumatic growth. And so we approach our clients with that mindset. We don't approach our clients, especially coaching clients, thinking that we want to integrate traumatic experiences, help you with your CPTSD or PTSD. That's not our intention. Our intention is to look at the client's autonomy and see how the trauma imprinting support clients. At the same time, how trauma imprinting perhaps limit clients. And that's why listening to relational aspects of client, in this case, allow me to say relational imprinting become important. As a reminder, you noticed when the child was attacked by a dog, the child could develop in the long run as an adult fear of the dog, which is the response, direct response. You could call it a trauma response. But we learned that actual trauma imprints has nothing to do with the fear of the dog. That's just only what is visible. Perhaps if it is debilitating or paralyzing the client, that might be considered as PTSD if other diagnostic criteria are met. So that specific response, that intense fear of the dog, could be considered as a trauma response, a symptom, and then the psychotherapist, trauma specialist will treat that. But we are not talking about that. We are talking about our clients, those who have come to learn unpredictability is dangerous. I think I mentioned this story last time, but I think worth remembering. One of my clients recently told that they were creating this new development in their life, them and their partner. They were investing a lot of money. And my client is someone who is quite fearless, willing to invest, willing to take risks. And on the other hand side, my client's partner, who is also extremely supportive, extremely loving, extremely caring, a person who wants nothing but the growth of their partner, my client, became very unsettled when they have to spend money. This specific development investment, let's say, was quite a considerable amount, considerable investment, risk, amount, intention, effort, and so on. During that period of time the investment was made, they had many arguments, they had many moments that they had disorganized behavior between them. And my client was so puzzled. Why is that? So the more my client unpacked and try to understand about their partner, the more she realized that her partner comes from a family where they have built themselves up step by step, having had many financial struggles. Someone who migrated from a faraway country to a different country with nothing, just arrived by a boat generations before. Therefore, she found out why her partner became very disorganized. So rather than making her partner more disorganized or more anxious, more worried, she created strategies to really help the partner to relax, regulate, and not to antagonize, escalate those uncomfortable experiences. Therefore, now they have gone through that phase. And now my client reports that their relationship has flourished during this process. She never mentioned to him that this is about your family, that you are disorganized, that you are triggered about finances. She did not. Rather, she created space. She allowed that to happen. She allowed that reaction rather than creating a reaction. So what she found out is that once this whole process is done, the investment is made, it's becoming successful, the partner has become even more loving, even more understanding. And she even said there are certain signs, a way of reciprocating those moments, treating her better, giving her treats, complimenting her. Is almost like their relationship elevated. So we notice that sometimes what our grandparents experienced as traumatic moments can be passed down through generations. And as they pass down through generations, sometimes ourselves, our partners, our clients, our loved ones don't even know why they experience that reality. So when you are aware, when you take a step back and not have your trauma triggered, it provides you with an opportunity. It provides you an opportunity to strengthen your love, strengthen the humanity, empathy, love, and care. That's why we are here, and that's why you are here. So thank you again for being here. So when the dog attacked the boy, when the boy grew up to be an adult, as he might be afraid of the dog or might not be afraid of the dog, his unconscious self has learned something much more, but perhaps affecting them. Unpredictability is dangerous. Now that's the imprint. It's no longer about the dog. It's no longer about afraid of dogs. It's about unpredictability. It's about conflict is dangerous. It's about threat is dangerous. So perhaps this person would react to a threat. Sometimes we say we overreacted. Sometimes we say, I was out of control when that happened, when I punched that person. I have no idea why. And that person will never consciously connect that to the attack of the dog. But that's what our nervous system has learned. The interesting thing about threat, when it comes to nervous system, it doesn't understand whether it is a dog, whether it's a financial crisis, whether it is a delayed train or missed flight. Unpredictability, conflict, threat is dangerous. That much we have learned. Perhaps not we, our other parents. Perhaps it's our grandparents or great-grandparents. So with that, we came to understand that when we focus on trauma disorders from a clinical perspective, there's a clinical diagnostic framework. A trauma imprint is an adaptive framework. It can be adopted. It's not necessarily about working through symptoms and trying to manage symptoms, which is most of the time modern medicine, modern psychotherapy. Not all. It's very important what medicine can do, what psychotherapy can do, but often it can be symptom focused, symptom management focused. And in trauma imprints, we focus on the adaptations, both the reason, understanding, and then adapting new possibilities, adapting into post-traumatic growth instead. In trauma disorders, mostly the focus is impairment, whereas in trauma imprints, it's the identity formation. And today we will learn relational expansion and nervous system regulation in the upcoming session and so on. Trauma disorders, there's many different types of trauma disorders. I think it's very limited when we say PTSD, CPTSD, ASD. These are not just the only, and these are also just only clinical criteria. There's so many challenges that we come across with trauma disorders. But we don't address trauma disorders with our clients. That's not our place. It's about identity, which is client autonomy. It's about relational aspects. It's about bodily, physical, somatic aspects, which is client autonomy. So we focus there. Clinical diagnoses are required in trauma disorders, and we look at trauma imprints from a human development lens. We do not need to have a specific criteria to diagnose clients as such. We invite them gently to recognize what are their adaptations, perhaps where they came from. Now, what does that mean to become aware and to take the right actions? Often visible distress in trauma disorders. In trauma imprints, we often see hidden within normal functioning without even realizing. Sometimes it can be subclinical. Sometimes there is nothing clinical, or there's no impairment, there's no distress, but there are patterns that are impairing them without them realizing. So trauma disorders are addressed in health clinical settings, and trauma imprints can be frequently encountered in coaching, not just only in coaching. Coaching is also limited, it's just a profession, but frequently encountered in day-to-day behaviors, feeling, challenges, difficulties, how we love, how we celebrate, how we relate, how we get angry, why we cry, why we don't cry, how we become vulnerable, why we speak to our child specific way, why we speak to our mother specifically, or why we do not speak to our mother, and so on. So many coaching clients may present with relational trauma imprints rather than diagnosable trauma disorders. If there are diagnosable trauma disorders, you refer them to the clinicians. But the relational trauma imprints that are quite silent, that are adaptations, are your world to invite for exploration. And if you remember during our last session, we discussed about the trauma imprinting pathway. I mentioned that this is not necessarily a clinical model as such. It's something that I created for us to understand the CTICC trauma framework in depth. So we looked at the event, we recognized that there are specific trauma responses, and we noticed that when it is repeatedly reinforced or not integrated, that could create a trauma imprint that could become part of who we are. It can be embodied, encoded into us. And that shapes our identity, which means it shapes our behavior, and it shapes our life outcomes, which means it shapes our relational aspects. Identity, behavior, life outcomes. Our relationships are entangled. Therefore, today we are adding a new layer to life outcomes, which is relational outcomes. Relational imprints, relational outcomes. So the narrative that we use with our clients, right? Not the client as the victim. It's not the client developed this avoidant behavior or this disorganized, anxious behavior because of what happened to them as a child, because the parents were wrong, parents were abusive. We don't say that. We say that the parents and the child were in such circumstances, their environment was such, their awareness was such, their knowledge was such, that was their situation, that was their reality. Therefore, our client has come to discover, their nervous system has come to discover that people pleasing, not getting deeply involved with people, involving emotion, involving vulnerability is unsafe. And that has become an identity imprint. sorry, it has become a relational imprint in this case, in today's session. Therefore, we remember that we don't blame anyone. We don't see our clients as a victim, neither we consider their parents, primary caregivers, or their situations to be blamed. We understand and we invite the client to understand, and that enables growth, that enables empathy. That's important. So you remember this petal, this flower. There are so many things that are playing a role. So it's easy to say trauma imprinting. It's easy to say adaptive imprinting, relational imprinting. But we know that they are not necessarily just separated. They do not exist in isolation. They exist as a whole, as many elements coming together. So that's where it becomes really complex. And that's also where it's important for us to debrief and understand them from different lenses of trauma imprinting so that we can be more aware what is required, what client is going through, how we invite them to explore that further. So the three key topics that we are addressing, the trauma imprints we are addressing. During last session, we addressed identity imprints. And today, we are going to focus on relational imprints. And of course, in the next session, we will focus on somatic imprints. In fact, one of you asked me at the very first session, how is trauma encoded in our nervous system? You remember, I did not jump into answering that question because there was a journey to happen. So now we have arrived at journey. In next session, I'm going to discuss how trauma is encoded in our nervous system. In a very, even beyond today, I'm going to go a little bit deeper into more scientific aspects of our body and our nervous system and uh, certain organs of our body, how they imprint trauma. So today we focus on relational imprints. So our discussion in that case, in this lecture 6, we focus on how trauma shapes the way we connect, love, lead, and belong. Is that what your clients want to do? To connect, to love, to lead, to belong. So it's important for us as professional coaches. So in our previous session, we asked, who did I become because of what happened? And today we are asking, how do these identities become his identity? Therefore, how do these identities now shape the way I relate to other people? How do I connect? How do I experience my relationships? From identity to how we relate. Because you're starting to recognize that they're interconnected so deeply. Reflection. Now we had a lot of reflections about our clients. Now let's reflect about ourselves. What are some of your primary expectations and needs from your relationships? Feel free to make a mental note or sketch it out. You don't have to say it. Primary expectations and needs from your relationships. Perhaps this question will be answered during this session. Therefore, we leave that little note there. So let's understand relational imprinting. Let's dive deep. So what's the psychological perspective? An imprinting, relational imprinting occurs when a traumatic, adverse, depriving, challenging, a significant life experience become integrated into one's unconscious expectations. Expectations. That's a question that we just asked. Expectations of what? Expectations of trust, safety, love, belonging, connection, understanding, feeling heard, treated with empathy, treated with care, treated with kindness, treated gently. Hmm? Did you have some of these written down or made a mental note to the earlier inquiry? What are some of your primary expectations and needs from your relationships? So then you're recognizing immediately those primary expectations, needs are created through the experiences we have had in the past, repeatedly, perhaps not integrated. And now, the way how we operate in our world, although we think this is how I am right now, this is what I need right now, this is what I expect right now, they may not have just formed yesterday. They may have been formed as an infant, or perhaps even as an embryo in the mom's womb, depending on the experiences of your mother. Trust, safety, love, belonging, connection, kindness. I think the list goes on. So the lens that you are using for these expectations and needs, in other words, the way that you love, are tremendously shaped by your past experiences. So the experience can be significant changes in your life. And there's a process that internalize what happens during those processes. You don't do that consciously. It's an unconscious process that happens within ourselves. It forms certain neural networks. It changes your nervous system. It changes how certain neurochemicals are released into your body, into your nervous system. It changes how your neural paths signal. Therefore, it changes the way it forms the way how you feel, how you interact, how you get hurt, how you feel loved, and so on. And this becomes an unconscious expectation as the output, the outlet, the primary needs: trust, safety, love, belonging, connection, empathy. And they become relational patterns. When your partner, when your child, when your best friend, someone closer to you, has a specific way of behaving, sometimes we call that's my pet peeve, that I can stand, that this is who I am in this relationship. You're actually communicating your relational patterns that are mostly unconscious. And the interesting thing is that we just identify with them because they have become part of our autonomy. So as coaches, you notice that, well, if there are such deep imprints, then working with those imprints, inviting clients to explore those imprints can be important because that's what creates relational outcomes. The way how you love your partner, the way how you feel satisfied in being in the presence of your loved one, the way how you feel satisfied bringing up your children, the way how you feel satisfied loving your parents or not loving your parents, or being angry with your partner or being frustrated with your child. All these outcomes are not just happening last night. They did not happen because your child painted on the wall. It's not because your mom called and demanded something. It's not because your partner just forgot your birthday or the anniversary. That how you reacted to it just didn't come up because of that moment. It happened long ago. To give you an example, when your child makes a mistake, some people would say, my child made a mistake. And some people would say, my child has no regards for all the hard work that I put into My child never hears how many times I told them not to do this. They have no whatsoever regards to me. Two different people, two different relational outcomes. Your partner forgot your birthday, forgot to bring your gift. One might say, my partner forgot my birthday. That can happen. And that can happen. People forget. And someone else might say, how dare, for their birthday, I went to all this length. I set an alarm. I made sure that they had the best party, the surprise, the gift. I counted all what they said up until that moment to make sure what gift to buy. But how dare they forgot my birthday. Same situation, two reactions. Am I saying any of the reactions are correct or wrong? Not necessarily. I'm inviting you to think about relational outcomes that derive from trauma imprints. I think I don't even have to go any further to explain it. You're already seeing it clearly. So, do you recall at the beginning I invited you to reflect? Do you listen to relational imprints of your clients? Because they communicate to you when they talk about their partner, when they talk about their child, when they talk about their uh, supervisor, their team members, they are communicating to you about their relational imprints. Perhaps they do not use that language, but they are always communicating. Question is, do we hear? Do we have the capacity to hear? Do we know what to do when we hear? So you're starting to recognize once again, I must remind you, it's convoluted. The identity is convoluted with relations. The relations are convoluted with epigenetics. It's convoluted with associations, experiences, the spiritual aspects, the religious aspects. So there's a lot of convolution in working with clients. So you're starting to recognize how sensitive one should be. I want to share with you something. The word sensitive, how sensitive working with our clients. For me, coaching is like a religious practice. Working with another human being's nervous system, their trauma imprinting is a very sensitive practice. Today, one of my clients sent me a video testimonial, and she wanted to advocate for my trauma work, psychedelic work that I do. So she took the initiative to send me a video talking about her experiences. And I want to share this with you, not to necessarily talk about myself, rather to invite you to think about how sensitive you are to your practice. So my client says in this video, it's going to come out in one of our websites. If you're curious, you can always let me know. I can share with you the video link later. So she said something like, I don't think that's how it should be approached, but this was her honest feedback. She said, when I worked with some other practitioners, they told her, they asked her, the word she used was pressurized. That how would you do this? When would you do this? How would you get this done? She said this in more of a getting things done. Put your phone aside. Get your phone to airplane mode and a couple of hours freed up. Do it. Get this done. So those practitioners have said. Now that she has been through this long journey of not that long, about six months of being in our psychedelic integration program, she has the trauma language now to debrief that situation. And she said, when I worked with that practitioner, I felt that they triggered all my past trauma because I am burdened by my family. I'm like a manager, I'm taking care of everyone. And when this practitioner insisted that I must put my phone on silent mode, and then to free up a couple of hours, I don't remember exact what she said, but she said something like, it sabotaged her. It didn't give her, it didn't sound like that she was trusted. She was heard. She was understood. And she said, when I worked with Fernando, something I noticed immediately is that Fernando had no expectation from me whatsoever. Fernando made me feel like I am perfect in every moment, that it was my best self in every moment. There was no expectation from the way how Fernando worked with me. She has come a long way from where she was, but she said at every step of the way, she felt like she was her perfect self, that she was acknowledged, supported, and regarded as her best self. I think, colleagues, you are starting to see the difference when I said sensitivity. Really, what are we doing with our clients? We really need to take a step back and ask ourselves, how do we create safety? I hear this word psychological safety being thrown around. I think it's just so overrated. But do we really know what psychological safety means? Sometimes we get to know that when clients give feedback. So you are probably starting to understand what sensitivity means working with clients. Because those trauma imprints are triggering us, although we are not consciously aware. And our clients get to learn as they work with different types of practitioners. So perhaps may I pose this question to you. What is your approach to helping your clients achieve? Is it a race that they must achieve? Is it shadowed by your own imprints that if the client created a massive breakthrough, if the client achieved all their goals, I am a good coach, the money is worth? Where do you think that might come from? What do you think that is doing to the client? Client might, yes, okay, I paid. I think that's the process. I don't know how coaching works. I don't know how the therapy works. So I have to follow but perhaps they leave our sessions broken or triggered or feeling like not heard. Listening to them, yes, holding space for them, being silent, they are all just surface level um, executions. But in order for us to become deeply aware of the sensitivity the clients are asking from us, comes from a place of deep knowledge, in this case, psychoeducation, having understood trauma imprinting, knowing about how to work with those sensitive parts very carefully. Let's look at the neurobiological perspective. It's important. So the repeated relational experience, perhaps not just only relational, all types of experiences that we are talking about now, influence attachment systems, which are deep-rooted neurological patterns, neural pathways, emotional implicit memories, nervous system regulation, threat prediction, how we respond to stress, gradually shaping how the brain, our nervous system, our body, our energetic self anticipate safety, how we process trust, connection within relationships. So we can't just get someone out of a trauma imprint or a relational imprint, like you might have seen a friend who has avoidant behavior. Recently, I'm working with a perfect example of disorganized relationship styles. One, the client is anxious, disorganized, and based on what the client is telling me, their ex-partner is very avoidant. Sounds like very avoidant. Therefore, this tug of a war, when the more the client is going towards the partner, the more the partner is going away. And when the client is silent for a while, then the partner shows up. And we can go upside down and tell the client, hey, your attachment style is this. That's why. The attachment style is this. That's why. And that doesn't make any changes. Why? Because now we are noticing that it's not just about a cognitive process. It goes beyond. It's in our body, it's in our nervous system, it's in our neural networks, it's in our attachment neural networks, it's in our entire nervous system. Therefore, it's not something that we can walk them out of their way. Right? So we are starting to recognize it's much more serious than that. Like this image comes to my mind as I do that. So when we take one time we go through the snow path, we establish that path. And the second person walks through that path because it's a known path. So it feels safe. Therefore, we took that path again and again and again. After a few times, there is this permanent mark. No one, perhaps very rarely in human situations, that one would go out of that path. They would stick to that path because safety is important. We learn to safeguard ourselves. You notice how I ended my previous lecture? If you recall, I said, it's not that nervous system is trying to harm you. It's your nervous system trying to safeguard you, protect you, love you, and make sure that you are safe. That's the most important function of the nervous system. It wants to make sure that you continue to survive. And in last session, we even asked existentially, why is that? What does that mean? If you would like to reflect beyond, just remove the poker face and go beyond the academia, just professional development. Why is that? Why is our nervous system trying so hard to keep us alive? Why is consciousness so important to us? We must ask. So now you're starting to recognize that when we have these repeated experiences, they influence processes, attachment, neural pathways, as I repeated. And then it integrates, it internalizes in our brain, our unconscious nervous system. So it becomes our blueprint. It's the lenses that we are wearing. We cannot see outside of the lens because it's what we are wearing. Sometimes loving someone can be so painful, not because that they did anything wrong, not because that you are not taken care of, not because that you were not loved, but because of our own head, the amount of contemplation, the amount of unfulfillment, the amount of baggages that we carried, that we cannot experience the lightness of being in partnership. And I'm saying this because before I went through all these journeys of healing, my psychedelic experiences, my awareness about trauma, I suffered so much. So I recall them. I see where they came from. I saw, now I see, I cannot say I saw. I see now how my mom came through me, how my mom came through me behaviorally. Her blueprint was, it was coming through me. It's fascinating. One of my clients recently going through psychedelic integration work, we have an activity where we look at the mirror. And this client said, looking at the mirror, this client said, I see my aunt coming through me. I see my mom coming through me. I can see my grandparent coming through me. She's not talking about their faces coming through her, but she's energetically resonating with kind of epigenetics, intergenerational trauma, the kind of trauma imprints that she has accepted as her blueprint. So what brain really anticipates after the blueprint is safety. Can I be safe with others? Can I trust others? Do I feel belong? And so on. So it shapes how we relate, how we trust, how we respond, how we react, how we attract, how we protect, and the list goes. And before I do that, now if you're wondering how deep this can go, I want to share with you an example. In literature, very often you hear things like, when I heard her voice like bells, please forgive my English. perhaps it's not the right term, but when I heard her beautiful voice like bells in the air, I immediately fell in love with her. Or with the flip of her hair, with the flip of her hair, I fell in love with her. How I Met Your Mother, right? At the first glance, I immediately fell in love with him. Would you agree that's possible? That you can fall in love with someone with the flip of her hair, with his deep voice, or when you just saw him for the first glance, you fell in love? Or is it an exaggeration in the literature? Would you like to know what I think? I think that's accurate. I think that's absolutely accurate. It's because we have a lot of arrogance, myself included, as human beings. We think that we are logically processing, we are conscious, we make decisions, and so on. But in reality, those are just stories we tell ourselves. The more you learn about trauma imprints, the more it becomes clear to us. What is really happening is that our brain has a way of evaluation criteria when we meet someone. So yesterday you met someone in the supermarket, the, the week before you went to a networking event, today you had a new client consultation call, and you would tell me, oh, really, Fernando, I do not have evaluation criteria. I'm authentic, I'm open, I embrace people who come my way. Yes, yes, I agree with you. That's not the kind of evaluation criteria I'm talking about, because that's a conscious criteria that you're talking about. But we are talking about unconscious criteria. Do you know that within milliseconds of someone coming into your presence, seeing, hearing, that within milliseconds you make a decision about this person, series of decisions, series of evaluations. The first evaluation is this person a threat? Not conscious. It does not take time. Milliseconds. There hasn't been enough number of um, electrons move through your nervous system from one end to the other end, logical brain connected, and so on to make this decision. No, it just happened already. You have that possibility as a human being. Let's say not a threat. No need to fight, no need to flight. All right. What do you think happens next? Yeah, you'll be surprised to know. Is there a potential for procreation? Yes. Yeah, I know that as civilized humans, we would want to say like, oh no, I don't look at anyone and think, no, you're not consciously thinking. It's already done for you. The next aspect that we think about is there a possibility for reproduction with this being? Is there social relevance? What is the potential value? And this is not something that you do consciously. I know that many of you are in committed relationships, you do not think about procreating with other people. That's think, but this is something unconsciously that happened, whether you like it or not. And then thirdly, is a person indifferent? The indifference. So your brain in milliseconds, within milliseconds, make these judgments about people. And that's why his strong vocal cords, what does that indicate? It indicates that that person has enough food supply to be able to have strong vocal cords. That means their generations have scared of threats like animals, predators, by using their voice. Therefore, they could make a good partner for me to have my offsprings. That's what your nervous system thought. While the civilized you thought, or I myself thought, oh, I do not look at this person in that way. I have my partner. But the nervous system already did. the flip of her hair, although you never thought, oh, does that person have good hair? Does that person have good minerals in her hair? How is the shininess? How long is the hair? Is it damaged? Do they have enough nutrition? We don't consciously think about people like that. But your nervous system did already. Nervous system already recognized, good minerals means good for food source. Long hair, jet black, or blonde, whatever. If they have good hair, that means they are well off. It means they have enough food supply. They have been able to maintain that food supply for a long time. Therefore, if I had my offspring with this person, I would be able to produce strong offsprings because their genetic code seems strong based on their hair. I think you don't need any more examples. So you're starting to recognize, although we think that relational aspects are processed, thought, contemplated, planned, reflected. Yeah, we do all that. But in reality, the relational imprints play a very strong role before you even think. Because to think, you need some time, more than few milliseconds. Therefore, you are starting to recognize relational aspects are so deep-rooted. It's part of our survival. It's part of our procreation. It's part of this consciousness continuation. They are so strongly hardwired. So you hear that humans are wired for connection. It's quite literal. It's not just a metaphor. It's not just a saying. It is literal. We are wired for connection. And if you ask professional coaches, all of you are aware of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. What's the third level? Love and belonging. It's a commodity. It's a basic need. Therefore, it's hardwired. Therefore, it's recognized in few milliseconds. Therefore, I believe when people say that I fell in love with that person with the deep voice, with the flick of her hair, I get it. It's understandable. Earlier, I asked you what are some relational aspects. Now, I think it's the right time to ask you what are some relational imprints you notice in your coaching clients? Here are some examples. When there's emotional neglect, adult relational pattern would be the internal working model could be people will reject me if they know the real me. They struggle to form close relationships, keep emotional distance, avoid avoids vulnerability because of the emotional neglect that they have experienced. And then someone who has been through a natural disaster, their adult relational pattern would be goes to extreme lengths to preserve relationships and avoid abandonment because of the experience of natural disaster. Perhaps no one was lost in the family, but they noticed the devastation of losing people. So the internal working model would be, I must hold on because everything can disappear. Even if my partner is violent, even my partner is toxic, abusive, I must hold on because I must see the good part of it because I have taught how devastating it can be. Just one example. How about chronic poverty? Adult relational pattern could be avoiding asking for help, even when support is available. The internal model would be, I cannot trust others to meet my needs. I must take care of myself. I am one of those big. I work alone often. I do things alone. I make decisions alone. And it hurts me very often. Although I have so many resources in my life, even now, it's not necessarily that I say in my head, I can't trust my partner or I can't trust my team. It's a relational imprint that I have learned somehow, although that's not what I cognitively think. That's not what I think, that I can't trust my partner, my sister, or my team. But that's what my body believes. So I can't sometimes just walk myself out of it unless I take a step back and recognize it and say, okay, Fernando, you need help. You really need help. It's so difficult to ask for help, but you need. It's going to be longer. It's going to be more difficult. It's going to take more time than you would do it. But you could do something else that no one else could do. I need to remind myself because I'm aware. How about your clients? Are they serious illness, adult relationship? Right now, I'm a little bit unwell. I'm in very good spirits, but physiologically, I'm a little bit unwell today, this past week. But guess what? My partner has no clue. Why is that? Because my mom used to fall sick all the time growing up, and she would fall sick fatally, and that would disrupt entire day-to-day life. I will have to cook. I'll have to wake up earlier. I'll have to wash my own clothes. I'll have to prepare food for my family, including my mother. And then I'll have to give lunch parcel to my sister, take her to the school, drop her there, and then carry one lunch parcel to my mother, walking through those lonely corridors, scary corridors of hospitals, long, long corridors. Now when I think of it, they feel like miles and miles. Probably they were just only a few hundred meters. But for me, when I think about those times my mom was unwell, those corridors feel like never ending. Therefore, I shouldn't burden myself because I learned something very, very mm, unimaginable as a child. Therefore, I have come to learn that I should not burden others. Therefore, I do not say anyone that I am unwell when I am. How about you? And on the other hand side, my partner, even just a little thing, they would say, "Oh, I have this problem here. I have that. I want to take antibiotics. Must I take paracetamol?" Very little, tiny little things. It's because I noticed that my partner has grown up in a place where they learned that they did not learn unimaginable things growing up. They learned falling sick as a normal day-to-day thing that happens to people. And then that it wouldn't disrupt the entire family because perhaps they had a family who managed those circumstances in a more in a different way, let's say. Betrayal. I don't think I had to explain this. Once you have got your heart broken, you know how difficult it is to trust. Because the internal model says that people will eventually betray me. And you know so many people, those who long for connection, yet how they move just right away from that connection. So we can't really talk about the relational imprints without touching base on attachment theory. If you remember, we discussed during our very first session the strange situation procedure. And so therefore, we need to quickly remind ourselves attachment theory. I know that many of you are very well aware of it, but please bear with me while I walk you through these few slides very quickly. Because attachment theory helps explain how relational experiences become lasting relational imprints. It gives us a window into understanding of relational imprints. To remind you, the attachment theory is developed by John Bowlby and Mary Annisworth created the strange situation procedure. If you remember Mothers with Children, the first session. And what it describes is that the early caregiving experiences shape a child's expectation of their relationships as a child, as an adolescent, and then as an adult. And these are what primarily form internal expectations of safety, trust, comfort, and connection. These expectations often continue into adulthood unless modified through coaching, through awareness, psychoeducation, therapy, self-awareness, and other practices. And we need to keep in mind that attachment is not a destiny. Attachment keeps changing. It is volatile, and that's the good news because it's adaptive. Therefore, we can use attachment. We could reform attachment in such a way that it serves us. So very quickly, we can talk about four key secure attachments. Sorry, four attachment styles. Secure attachment, simply feels safe with closeness, comfortable with trust and independence, expects relationships to be supportive. An anxious attachment style fears rejection and abandonment, seeks reassurance and closeness, may become emotionally dependent on the person. Avoidant attachment values self-reliance, suppresses emotional needs, and avoid vulnerability or intimacy. Whereas disorganized attachment has it says itself disorganized, simultaneously desires, fears closeness. Relationship may feel confusing and unpredictable, often associated with consistent or frightening caregiving experiences. Because inconsistent and frightening caregiving experiences. So if we, for an example, in if I talk about my attachment styles, over the past years, I have created a very strong secure attachment, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I don't have tendencies of disorganized attachment style. My mom, as I mentioned to you, based on her traumatic experiences, she used to have very strong ups and downs in her life. Now she has overcome all of those challenges and she is healed in many ways and she has a very peaceful life and we have a peaceful, beautiful relationship with our parents. Nevertheless, some of those ghosts, some of those whispers still whisper through my ears. I still find myself sometimes in certain disorganized styles of relationship, although predominantly I have created a secure attachment for myself. So I think it's important for us to quickly dive deep. How are these formed? So usually when it is a consistent, responsive caregiving experience, child experience, I am worthy of love. Others are trustworthy and dependable. The world is safe. So that builds a secure attachment. And I think we live in an interesting world nowadays. Where we pay our attention is where we have our resources. Simply think about social media. Someone who thinks the world is a positive place, someone who appreciates positive events, developments, things that are considered as positive. So they will, when they scroll down through their social media, they will spend a few seconds more on those posts. Perhaps it's about positive psychology. Perhaps it's about wonderful relationships. Perhaps it's about achievements. So the algorithm learns, this person likes this kind of posts, more positively connotated. So what does it do? It shows that person more of that. So that person's understanding about the world, that if their news source, for an example, is social media, grows in that positive direction. And think about inconsistent caregiving, which builds, I need to try hard to love to keep it, right? To get love and to keep it. Others may leave. I'm not always secure. So perhaps they might post on a social media post that communicates something more, let's say, negative. That's something more tragedy, something more insecurity, something more evoking fear. So the social media learned, this person like this kind of content. So let's push it. So you're starting to recognize our world is constructed. It's not necessarily the way how I see the world, the way how I think about the world is a projection of our inner world, which I don't have to say this, but now it makes more sense as I say it, as you're looking at things. So it's not just only about relationships. It's just not about romantic relationships. It's about your social media. It's about how you perceive the world. It's about how you how you lead. It's about how you coach. It's about how you move. It's about how you dance. Usually, when a child is emotionally neglected or rejected, they think, I don't need anyone. Others are not available. My needs don't matter. I must rely on myself. So we create avoidant attachment, for an example. And when we have experienced fear, abuse, trauma, unpredictable caregiving, in other words, almost sounds like CPTSD, complex traumatic experiences. I want closeness, but I feel unsafe. I want to love, but I'm afraid. People are confusing, people are unpredictable. But actually, who's really unpredictable is ourselves. Who's really unable to create closeness is ourselves. It's not the world outside. So you always hear the world outside of you is a projection of you are. It's not, no one sees the world as it is. We see the world as we are. I think let's focus on this part here, how attachment styles show up in relationships, how safe it feels to trust others. What kind of comfort do I have with intimacy, vulnerability? What are the expectations of acceptance, rejection, responses to conflict and separation, willingness to seek, receive support? So you are starting to recognize that these elements that often you perhaps notice in your clients could be directly connected to relational imprints. What we need to keep in mind is if these relational imprints were created through repeated experiences, they also can be changed, mended, amended through repeated experiences. And these repeated experiences can go both ways. It could create a domino effect. For an example, if we simply look at early influences of how our attachment blueprint is created, early caregiving experiences, which forms attachment style, adversity, trauma experience as a child. And not only that, we can't blame everything on our parents, and we do not blame anything on parents. We do not blame anything on anyone for that matter. We understand, we recognize the situation was such. They did not have awareness. They did not know the science. Even if they did, perhaps they were not able to actualize it. Because sometimes it could be genetic. It could be genetic factors that are influencing us, how we behave, because of how our grandmother was betrayed by her lover. Perhaps her lover never wanted to betray her. Perhaps he was traumatized. Perhaps he was abducted, and grandmother waited forever. After that, had your mother. I'm not saying that if someone was abandoned, that it will be transferred through genetics. I think that would be scientifically inaccurate. I think I just took it too lightly, but you understand what I mean here. So it creeps into how we organize a family as a parent, how we work with our children, how we work within our community. Do we trust our community or not? How we engage in our romantic partners, our children and their generations, our children and their children, clients and colleagues, supervisors and um, superiors, friends and peers. They all creep into these relationships. And more importantly, they creep into our own relationships. And that's why sometimes we don't look in the eye in the mirror when we look back at ourselves. I know my clients have told me, I haven't looked in the mirror. I have looked in the mirror, but I haven't looked in the eyes of my own eyes in the mirror, Fernando, for 3 months. Ever since that incident, I have not been able to look in the mirror and look right into my eyes. Can you believe it, colleagues? Because the trauma imprints not just only outward, they are Also, they also go inward as well, our own relationship as well. I added this slide for you. When you download this, you have a look. We discussed this in depth so far. And if you may recall, in our last session, we talked about what are some of the identity imprinting. And do you know that identity imprinting or even identity imprinting triggers are very close to the relational imprinting? In fact, in this slide, they're exactly the same. We talked about during last week how criticism, rejection, visibility, uncertainty, conflict, failure could trigger identity imprints. And interestingly, all of those triggers that triggered identity imprints are also directly interacting with relational imprinting. So you are starting to recognize what I meant by sensitivity. You are starting to understand why you should not quickly interpret. So very often when some new professionals come to this space, become a trauma-informed coach, they think their job is to interpret trauma for the client. You can imagine how sensitive the trauma imprints are, how it's not possible to interpret trauma for anyone because of the complexity of it. If the person themselves cannot do it, how can we do that as an outsider? So as you're going through this program, if you ever thought, now I can help my clients interpret trauma because I have a deeper knowledge and I can provide insight, you're starting to recognize perhaps that's a false belief. And the way how the trauma, the relational imprinting stored or through which channels they are stored, exactly the same channels the identity imprinting is stored. And these 5 pointers were there in the previous slides, but I used AI to make it look a little bit more beautiful. I don't know if it's beautiful or not. Implicit memory, emotional memory, core belief, self-schema, nervous system learning. These are 5 key ways of how relational imprinting are stored through our body. So you're starting to recognize they use the same neural paths. They sometimes use the same neural networks and certain parts of our nervous system. So they are intricate. They are so nuanced. We cannot just simply interpret it for the clients. Neither clients can interpret for themselves. But what they can do is become aware of it with your help. So identity imprints rarely stay within identity itself. They almost always spill over into relationships, whether we like it or not. And we do not have conscious control over this either. So you might recall the brief case study that we looked at based on identity imprinting. And I added a new section, which is relational outcome today. Last time we talked about life outcomes, but today I included relational outcomes. The person who received repeated criticism became that perfectionist, now has some potential benefits of relational outcomes, potential costs. In this case, they are very similar in all the 3 that we are discussing. The hyper-independent one, the perfectionist, and the invisible one. So you notice that each one has some advantages, benefits, reliable and dependent, loyal and committed, high standards in relationships, supports others consistently, the perfectionist. But at the same time, potential costs could be difficulty being emotionally vulnerable, fear of disappointing others, people pleasing and overgiving, difficulty receiving love, care, and support. And if you look at the hyper-independent one, immediately tells us that there are potential benefits. Reliable during crisis, respect others' independence, strong boundaries, stable under pressure, the hyper-independent one. But they find it difficult trusting others. Perhaps there's emotional distance. Might not be always, because I can relate to this one, emotional distance. When something is triggered within me, let's say between me and my partner, often I might I might speak, I might do things, I might smile, I might act like there's nothing wrong, but deep down inside of me, there is a part of me distancing. That hurt I experienced as a child is experienced inside of me. Avoids asking for support, limited emotional intimacy, hyper independent one. The invisible one, being seen is dangerous. Therefore, I would self silence because I would like to have an invisible identity. This person could be a thoughtful listener, perhaps low interpersonal conflict, appears to be humble and accommodating, gives space to others. Potential cost, difficulty expressing their own needs, hesitate from deep relationships, fear of being truly seen in the relationships. Relationships could remain emotionally distant. So as you're going through these slides, perhaps you're recognizing these in some of your loved ones and your social circle. So we must ask, do you notice relational aspects? We used that word earlier, relationship qualities earlier. Now I think we have the ability to use the word adaptive relational imprinting in your clients. And how do you actively address them? I think this is a reflection for you for later. Like I said during our last lecture, everything is an imprint and we are stuck with it is not our intention of this lecture series. I think it's apparent to you. What is really our focus here is that how to transform relational imprints. Like I mentioned during last session, psychoeducation. How many of you are quite literally, I know that many of you knew this knowledge. Perhaps the perspective is new. Perhaps the pace is different. So you created psychoeducation for yourself. You learned what happened and how to manage. So you're starting to recognize why psychoeducation is an important part of your relationship with the client. Not implying anything, but providing the client with the right psychoeducation. Or if you are not the one educating, because if you don't want to take the educator role within a coaching engagement, there's enough and more resources out there that you can either prompt the client towards, if not, the client can find themselves. And going through corrective experiences like choosing new ways to respond. Be aware of unconscious responses and having anticipated them. Build regulation and flexibility around them rather than having those rigid neural networks. Perhaps seeking trauma-informed coaching or working with a trauma specialist, trauma-informed therapist, and engaging in corrective relational experiences. If you have been hurt in the past, stepping into new relationships, not from a place of fear, but from a place of hope, empathy, and deep understanding through these interventions that we can create. So you're starting to recognize the power you hold as a professional coach when you can bring trauma sensitivity to your work. You don't necessarily need to work as a trauma-informed coach or trauma integration coach if you believe that you're not qualified. But I think this series already gives you deep understanding of the sensitivity required from you. Even it gives you the referral paths. It gives you an understanding of where to intervene and where not to intervene. That was the purpose of creating this series. So today we are adding a new word. Perhaps you knew the word trauma imprinting from the very beginning. And during our last session, we highlighted that we don't have to necessarily call them trauma imprinting. It's a technical word that's important in clinical environments, but when it comes to our language, our day-to-day language with your loved ones, with your clients, they're adaptive imprinting. If not even better said, they are protective imprinting. They are relational imprinting. Because the nervous system is not trying to sabotage your relationships. Because the nervous system is trying to protect you within your relationships. And that's how trauma informs love. All right, so with that, colleagues, we are ending the session at the right time. I hope my sister has shared the link with you for the certification. And I very much look forward to seeing you in our next session. And you already are aware that we will be discussing about how our body remembers the past experiences unconsciously without our knowing how somatic imprinting is created. I'm very excited to share this upcoming session with you, and I also believe lots of things that we are learning here will be deeply integrated in our next session. So, with that, I send all of you love and light and look forward to seeing you in the next session. And once again, thank you very much for joining with me today.